Dr. Kennedy Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In his statement opening the parliamentary year, the Prime Minister allowed the nation one sentence on climate change. Following the Paris Agreement, he says the government will complete its ETS review, which will assess the scheme's effectiveness to 2020 and beyond. So let's explore the relationship between the Paris Agreement and the ETS review here in New Zealand. The Paris outcome is going to require higher standards of behaviour from all 196 states parties to the Framework Convention. It aims to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change. Article 4 provides that developed countries should continue to take the lead. The accompanying decision says that much greater emission reductions will be required than those associated with the intended 1.5 degree threshold. New Zealand's INDC for 2030 of 11% is regarded by independent observers as inadequate and poor. So to meet our legal obligations out of Paris, New Zealand will be obliged to increase its INDC before ratification of the agreement. The onus is therefore on New Zealand to review its target, not at its leisure, but now. A greater mitigation reduction effort will require fundamentally different reasoning. And so it is best to recognise now what, with respect, we think has been incorrect in this current government's thinking. The Cabinet paper of last year shows how the government's thinking has trended in making what is perhaps the most critical decision in New Zealand's history. Let us consider what it does not do. It does not explore the global mitigation required between 2015 and 2030 for the temperature goal, even though the paper states that the goal is in New Zealand's interests. It cites, without concern, the Prime Minister's scientific advisor that sustained reduction in global emissions of the order of 40 to 70% by 2050 compared with 2010 is required. It touches, only in passing, on ways of comparing targets. It identifies 4 methods: equal cost, equal per capita emissions, historical responsibility, and equal reductions from business as usual. It does not explore any of these in detail, and it does not assess them. And it fails to acknowledge the sophisticated models for determining fair shares around the world. What is required is a Cabinet paper no later than mid-2016 that will do 5 things. First, it will acknowledge the required reduction in global emissions in 2030 from the INDC projected 55 gigatons to 42 for 2 degrees and 39 for 1.5. Second, it will acknowledge the integrity and applicability of the principle of equity in the Framework Convention and the results which the research institutes have reached regarding each country's responsibility level in 2030. It will note the 2 main studies done in this respect: contraction and convergence and equity reference, indicating that New Zealand's responsibility will be as low as 23 megatons or even 5 megatons in 2030. This compares with our current megatons rate of 67. Third, it will explore the maximum domestic abatement potential for New Zealand by 2030 in meeting that responsibility and acknowledge a responsibility to make up any shortfall through climate financing. Fourth, it will develop a national climate action plan with the most effective set of climate policies and regulatory measures designed to reach the maximum domestic abatement potential. And 5, it will ensure that the National Climate Action Plan reflects optimal equity among all relevant intersectoral and societal interests to the extent possible. Mr. Speaker, there is a need for a genuine cross-party dialogue on climate policy in this Parliament, one that finds sufficient common ground for a predictable and far-reaching national plan of action for the sake of future generations.